It all began quietly, on the edge of known space where the light from the nearest stars barely reached. Humanity had made remarkable progress over the decades, building colonies and outposts across multiple star systems. Earth had learned the hard way that peace was fragile, and it had taught its people to be cautious, to trust only those who had proven themselves over time. Yet even with all the caution, no one could have anticipated the betrayal that was coming. The Galactic Council, an alliance of powerful civilizations meant to uphold order and protect smaller planets, had been the symbol of stability in the galaxy. For years they had claimed to safeguard the colonies from pirates, raiders, and rogue fleets that threatened the delicate balance of interstellar trade. Humanity, still recovering from its own wars and internal struggles, placed a cautious trust in the Council. It was a trust based not on blind faith but on necessity. Humanity knew that to survive and prosper in this vast galaxy, alliances mattered. But sometimes alliances came with a cost, and that cost could be far greater than anyone expected. When the first distress signals arrived from the frontier colonies, humanity listened carefully. The messages were urgent, desperate pleas for help. These colonies were small, inhabited by a mix of human settlers and allied species who had been working together to carve a life in the harsh emptiness of space. Reports spoke of attacks by unknown forces, pirates who seemed unusually well organized and heavily armed. The people on those planets had nowhere else to turn. They expected the Council to act as promised. They expected justice. Days passed. Weeks passed. And then the unthinkable happened. Transmissions leaked from deep space. Fragments of a horror too terrible to be ignored. The Council fleets had attacked. Not the pirates, not the raiders, but the colonies themselves. Entire populations were wiped out in coordinated strikes. Ships that once carried hope and resources for the settlements were now nothing but twisted metal drifting through space. Communications from the colonies stopped abruptly, replaced by static and brief, broken messages filled with fear and confusion. On Earth, disbelief turned into outrage. The government convened emergency councils, military strategists reviewed every available transmission, and the people of Earth watched in stunned silence as the truth unfolded. The Council, the very entity that had promised protection, had betrayed the galaxy's most vulnerable. The question that hung over every meeting, every conversation, and every news broadcast was simple and devastating. Why? Some suggested it was a calculated political move, a cold attempt to consolidate power by removing what the Council considered unnecessary burdens. Others believed it was fear of change, fear of emerging alliances, fear of humanity's growing influence in galactic affairs. Whatever the reason, the result was the same. Innocent lives had been extinguished, and the galaxy had been left to grapple with the enormity of what had occurred. In the weeks that followed, a group of Earth's most brilliant minds and bravest officers came together in secrecy. They began to piece together fragments of intelligence, intercepted transmissions, and the last recordings from the colonies. The data painted a horrifying picture. The attacks were deliberate. The Council had chosen to eliminate entire settlements under the guise of maintaining order, targeting communities that posed no real threat to anyone. Families, scientists, engineers, and children, all gone, sacrificed in a decision made far from the eyes of those who would suffer. The team working on the evidence understood the danger of exposing the truth too quickly. To reveal the Council's betrayal before Earth was ready could have led to political isolation or worse, outright war. Still, the moral weight of the situation could not be ignored. Humanity had faced countless crises before, from natural disasters to internal conflicts, and it had learned that turning away from injustice only allowed it to grow. This was a moment where humanity could either stand silent or stand strong, and the choice was clear. As the evidence mounted, the people of Earth began to feel the first stirrings of collective grief. News outlets shared the stories of those lost, often recounting messages from survivors who had managed to escape the attacks by sheer luck. The accounts were heart-wrenching, parents watching helplessly as their homes were destroyed, friends torn apart by violent chaos, communities reduced to nothing more than memories and floating debris. Humanity had faced tragedy before, but this was different. This was a betrayal on a scale that demanded more than mourning. It demanded action. It was during one late-night meeting in the Central Command of Earth's Space Fleet that the first concrete plans were made. Leaders and officers, knowing the Council's reach and power, had to tread carefully. They could not act recklessly. Every move had to be calculated, precise, and purposeful. The plan, quietly named Operation Dawnlight, was not about vengeance. It was about accountability. Humanity's goal was not to destroy for the sake of destruction, but to shine a light on the truth and ensure that no one else would suffer in silence. As the plan took shape, civilians watched the skies, unaware of the preparations happening in secret. There was a quiet tension in the air, a mixture of fear, hope, and determination. Humanity had learned through its own history that courage often appeared in moments of uncertainty, and that justice required patience as well as strength. Families gathered around screens to witness updates. Scientists pored over intercepted data to uncover hidden patterns, and military strategists simulated every possible scenario. Everyone had a role, even if that role was simply to bear witness to what was coming. The betrayal of the Council had ignited a sense of unity across Earth. Nations that had long argued over borders and resources found common ground and shared outrage and grief. Space stations once used for research were converted into coordination hubs. Communications experts worked around the clock to decrypt Council codes. Engineers and shipbuilders innovated in ways that pushed the boundaries of human capability. Every sector of society was involved in preparing for what was to come. Yet the true aim remained clear. Humanity would not become what it fought against. Despite the planning and preparation, there were moments of doubt. Some whispered that confronting the Council was foolhardy, that Earth would pay too high a price for daring to defy an alliance that spanned countless worlds. Others feared that any misstep could lead to further loss. Another tragedy layered upon the one that had already devastated the galaxy. But the memory of the lost colonies, of the families who had vanished, of the voices that cried out in fear and confusion, was too powerful to ignore. Humanity could not remain idle. Even as operations continued in secret, everyday life went on for ordinary people. Children played under the watchful eyes of parents. Workers labored in factories and labs, and communities celebrated small victories and holidays as they had always done. But underneath the ordinary, the extraordinary was unfolding. Humanity was learning to channel grief into resolve, anger into careful action, and disbelief into a plan that could bring justice across the stars. It was in these moments between grief and hope, between silence and action, that the true nature of humanity shone. It was not in the advanced technology, the massive warships, or even the intercepted transmissions. It was in the people who refused to give up, who believed that one day the truth would be known, and who understood that standing for justice meant taking risks that others would not. By the time Earth's leadership was ready to act, the groundwork had been laid. Plans were in place, evidence had been gathered, and a united front stood ready. The betrayal of the Galactic Council was no longer a secret, no longer a story told in whispers. Humanity was ready to step forward, to reveal the truth and to make sure that the lives of those lost were not forgotten. Operation Dawnlight was no longer a plan. It was a promise. The stars above Earth, once distant and cold, now seemed closer, almost expectant. Humanity's journey had begun, not as conquerors, not as aggressors, but as witnesses and defenders. The betrayal had changed everything, but it had also awakened a courage that could not be contained. Across the galaxy, silent observers, other civilizations who had long doubted humanity's strength, would soon learn that when Earth decided to act, it acted not out of fear or impulse, but with a clear, unwavering purpose. And so, as the first signals of Operation Dawnlight began to hum across the secret channels of Earth's fleets, humanity waited with bated breath. The betrayal of the colonies would not go unanswered. The Galactic Council would soon understand that in trying to suppress justice, they had awakened a force far greater than they had imagined. And though the journey ahead was uncertain, one truth remained unshakable. The people of Earth would stand for justice no matter the cost, because some things were more important than survival. They were sacred. The memory of the lost colonies, the cries of the innocent, and the betrayal of the Council would not fade. They would fuel a resolve that would carry humanity across the stars, into a reckoning that would change the galaxy forever. And as Earth's fleet prepared to take its first steps toward justice, the story of courage, determination, and truth began in earnest, a story that would be told for generations to come. The weeks after the betrayal were tense and filled with uncertainty. Earth's leaders, scientists, and military strategists worked day and night, trying to piece together every fragment of information about the Council's attacks. The evidence was horrifying. Every colony destroyed had sent out last-minute distress signals that were intercepted by Earth's listening posts. These signals weren't just cries for help. They were final testimonies, messages that spoke of fear, confusion, and disbelief. Humanity had lost friends and allies who had placed their trust in the same galactic system that was meant to protect them. As more data was gathered, a team of researchers began decrypting hidden transmissions from the Council. These messages revealed the chilling truth. The attacks were not random or defensive. They were carefully planned. The colonies had been targeted because they represented a potential challenge to the Council's absolute control. Earth's analysts discovered detailed maps of fleet movements, showing Council warships approaching, civilian settlements under the pretense of peacekeeping, missions. The very alliance humanity had trusted had become the instrument of destruction. The findings shocked Earth's political leaders. Yet amid the shock, there was also clarity. Humanity now knew what had happened, and with that knowledge came responsibility. If Earth remained silent, the betrayal would continue, and other colonies could fall without warning. The burden of truth rested heavily on the shoulders of those who had the ability to act. A special command unit was assembled in secrecy. This unit was a mix of military strategists, intelligence officers, and scientists, each one selected for skill, courage, and loyalty. Their mission was clear: uncover every detail about the Council's plans, gather irrefutable evidence of the atrocities, and prepare Earth to respond with justice, not vengeance. They called themselves the Dawnlight Team, a name that symbolized hope rising from darkness. The work of the Dawnlight Team was painstaking. They spent hours decoding intercepted messages, reconstructing the events at each destroyed colony, and verifying the identities of those responsible. Every piece of information mattered. A misplaced fact could be used by the Council to discredit Earth or to justify further attacks. Meanwhile, civilians on Earth began noticing subtle changes. Ships being refitted with new technology, research labs working tirelessly, and unusual communications traffic between Earth's command centers and distant observation satellites. The people of Earth did not yet know the full story, but there was an undeniable sense of anticipation. In homes and public spaces, conversations shifted from everyday concerns to whispered debates about the Council's betrayal. Parents spoke cautiously to their children, explaining that some leaders in the galaxy could not be trusted, while teachers incorporated lessons about vigilance and morality into discussions about history and space exploration. Humanity had always valued courage and justice, and now these principles were more important than ever. Among the Dawnlight Team, there was no room for personal pride or hesitation. Every decision mattered. Analysts discovered that the Council had hidden the full extent of its actions behind false reports, claiming that colonies had rebelled or caused their own destruction. But evidence from surviving scouts, escape pods, and covert communications proved otherwise. Families had done nothing wrong. Communities had been wiped out simply because they existed in the wrong place at the wrong time. As the team delved deeper, they realized that the Council had underestimated humanity's ability to learn and adapt. Small data leaks had been ignored by the Council as inconsequential. They did not see that these fragments could be collected, analyzed, and presented in a way that exposed the truth. Humanity was turning the Council's own arrogance against them. Amid the technical work, human stories emerged that strengthened the resolve of those preparing for action. Among the few survivors of the attacks were scientists who had been experimenting with advanced propulsion systems, engineers who had been building colonies in hostile environments, and ordinary families who had witnessed destruction firsthand. Their accounts were harrowing. One pilot recounted the moment a Council warship opened fire on a peaceful settlement, describing the smoke, the chaos, and the sound of alarms blaring as entire neighborhoods were obliterated. Another survivor told of watching their friends sacrifice themselves to save children from evacuation pods, their bravery etched permanently in the minds of those who survived. These stories were not just data points. They were reminders of why action was necessary. Humanity was not preparing for war because of ambition or conquest. They were preparing to uphold justice, to ensure that no other innocent life would be lost to betrayal or deception. Every calculation, every plan, every new piece of technology being developed had a human face attached to it. In the political sphere, leaders began coordinating with allied planets that had been wary of the Council. Small factions, once isolated and fearful, began to communicate their willingness to support Earth. These alliances were cautious at first. Trust had been broken, and any false move could trigger further tragedy. But the evidence that Earth had gathered, combined with the Dawnlight team's meticulous plans, slowly won confidence. Allies began to see that humanity was committed not to revenge, but to justice and protection. While Earth was gathering intelligence and forming alliances, Council leaders remained blind to the growing storm. They believed humanity's grief would remain passive, that humans would focus inward on mourning rather than acting outward in defense of truth. But the opposite was happening. Grief had become a catalyst for resolve. Humanity was learning quietly and carefully to prepare for a confrontation that could expose the Council's wrongdoing to the entire galaxy. During this time, ordinary civilians played a role as well. Volunteers in communication centers helped translate intercepted signals. Engineers contributed by developing shielding technologies, and scientists tested new sensors that could detect Council activity far in advance. It was a collective effort, one that bridged military, political, and civilian life. Humanity was realizing a simple truth. Justice was not achieved by a single hand, but by the combined effort of a determined people. Meanwhile, Earth's media began to subtly prepare the population. News reports framed the story in terms of accountability and morality, rather than revenge. Documentaries, simulations, and broadcasts illustrated the devastation faced by the colonies, emphasizing the courage and sacrifices of ordinary beings rather than the cruelty of the Council. Humanity needed to understand the stakes and be ready for the coming challenge, and media became a tool for collective education and moral preparation. As the weeks turned into months, the Dawnlight team completed its first major milestone. Every intercepted message had been decrypted, every surviving witness interviewed, and every Council claim cross-checked against independent data sources. The picture was now complete. The attacks had been deliberate, calculated, and motivated by fear and ambition. Humanity had enough evidence to confront the Council openly. Even then, caution remained. The Council's fleets were vast and their political influence reached far across the galaxy. Any premature action could result in unnecessary loss of life. Leaders weighed every option, simulating countless scenarios and considering the possible outcomes. Humanity's goal remained unchanged: expose the truth, protect the innocent, and ensure that justice was achieved without unnecessary destruction. By the end of this period of research and preparation, humanity had changed fundamentally. It was no longer a planet simply reacting to events in the galaxy. It had become a force capable of standing against deception and betrayal. Every human who had contributed, whether on the front lines, behind consoles, or in quiet observation posts, understood that the coming steps would define their place in galactic history. Even with all the planning, there was a sense of anticipation and anxiety that could not be ignored. The first signals that Operation Dawnlight would soon be activated were subtle: encrypted transmissions, fleet movements, and test exercises. Yet those who watched closely could see that Earth was ready. Humanity's grief had transformed into purpose, its outrage into strategic planning, and its loss into a collective commitment to ensure that no betrayal would go unanswered. Through it all, the human spirit remained at the center of every action. Leaders who made decisions considered not only strategic outcomes, but the moral weight of their choices. Scientists and engineers innovated not for fame or profit, but to protect lives. Civilians contributed not for recognition, but because they understood that the lives of the innocent depended on their courage and diligence. The story of humanity was becoming one of resilience, justice, and unyielding determination. As part 2 of this journey came to a close, Earth stood at the threshold of a new chapter. The Dawnlight team had uncovered the truth, prepared the strategy, and ensured that humanity was ready to act. The betrayal of the colonies had left scars, but it had also awakened a unity and strength that no one, not even the Council, could ignore. Humanity was no longer waiting. It was preparing to move forward, to shine a light on the truth and to bring justice to those who had been wronged. And though the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. The people of Earth had become the voice of the fallen coal. The galaxy, vast and indifferent, seemed to stretch endlessly around Earth. From orbit, the planet looked peaceful, a blue jewel floating in darkness. But beneath that calm surface, preparations were reaching a critical stage. Humanity had spent months gathering evidence, building alliances, and refining plans. And now the moment was approaching when the first signals of action would echo across the stars. The anticipation was a quiet, tense energy, felt by everyone involved, from fleet commanders to civilians watching the skies. The first whispers of Earth's intentions began circulating beyond the planet. Small systems near the Council's borders reported unusual fleet activity, strange signals, and unconfirmed reports of massive ships being mobilized in areas previously thought unoccupied. The Council, confident in its superiority, dismissed these reports. They assumed humanity's grief had not yet transformed into decisive action, that humans would hesitate, that fear would temper resolve. They were wrong. Behind closed doors, the Dawnlight team worked tirelessly. Every plan, every simulation, every calculation was reviewed multiple times. Analysts compared Council patrol routes with intelligence about the destroyed colonies, identifying weak points where Earth could make its presence known without unnecessary risk. Engineers tested new propulsion systems that allowed ships to move silently through unmonitored sectors. Communications teams prepared encrypted transmissions to reach allied planets quietly. Every step was meticulous. Humanity's goal was not to strike blindly but to act with precision, showing the galaxy that justice could be delivered carefully, fairly, and effectively. The people of Earth watched, often without knowing the full picture, yet they could feel something shifting. Military exercises became a source of quiet pride, and conversations about the lost colonies began to take on a new tone. It was no longer just grief. They were part of a story that was about to unfold. A story of courage and moral clarity. Citizens understood, even in small ways, that the world they knew was about to take a stand, not just for itself, but for those who could not fight back. The first movement of the Earth fleet was subtle but intentional. Ships that had previously been in training zones were repositioned toward the outer sectors, moving in formation, but remaining cloaked to avoid detection. The Council's sensors, sophisticated and numerous, picked up anomalies, but they assumed them to be standard training exercises. The humans had learned from their mistakes and from the mistakes of others. Visibility could be manipulated, and perception could be controlled. As the fleet moved, the Dawnlight team simultaneously prepared the diplomatic front. Messages, encrypted and sent through multiple channels, reached allied worlds, explaining that Earth's actions were not aggressive but preventive. The goal was transparency. No planet would be caught in the middle of retaliation, and no innocent life would be endangered. The clarity of purpose, combined with the weight of evidence from the destroyed colonies, made many previously hesitant allies reconsider their stance. Slowly, support began to form beyond Earth's orbit. Meanwhile, the Council's confidence began to show cracks, not because they had noticed the fleet, but because dissent was rising within their own ranks. Some members had started questioning the morality of the attacks on the colonies, realizing that humanity's growing influence and careful planning could expose the truth to the entire galaxy. In private, they debated how to handle the situation, but their indecision only allowed Earth's preparations to continue unchallenged. On board the lead ship of the human fleet, the commander looked out through reinforced glass at the vastness of space. Unlike other leaders who might feel fear or doubt, there was a quiet resolve in every movement, every decision, and every glance. The commander had grown up hearing stories of Earth's struggles, the countless sacrifices of ordinary people, and the idea that courage was not measured by size or firepower but by moral clarity. The fleet was ready, and the people on board understood that this operation was not about war. It was about standing for what was right. The first true contact came in an unexpected form. A small Council reconnaissance ship, tasked with monitoring sector borders, detected the human fleet's unusual formation. Its sensors registered the size and sophistication of the ships, far beyond what anyone had expected from a planet recovering from past conflicts. The reconnaissance crew sent an alert to the nearest Council command post, expecting that the humans would retreat or negotiate. Instead, the humans remained on course, silent and unwavering. When the alert reached Council headquarters, the reaction was immediate panic. Leaders who had previously dismissed humanity now had to reconsider. Intelligence reports, intercepted messages, and rumors from allied worlds suggested that Earth was preparing to make a statement. The Council's confidence wavered. The same arrogance that had led them to betray the colonies now threatened to leave them exposed. Decisions were made hastily, and fleets were scrambled in a rushed attempt to monitor or intercept Earth's movements. On Earth's side, the Dawnlight team had anticipated this reaction. Contingencies had been built into every maneuver. As the Council fleets mobilized, the human fleet adjusted course, exploiting gaps and blind spots in sensor coverage. Small teams of ships acted as decoys, drawing attention away from the main force. The strategy was as much about deception as it was about defense, and it worked with remarkable precision. Beyond the tactical aspects, humanity's actions had a psychological impact. The first transmissions of Earth's movements were intercepted by neutral worlds, many of whom had long felt oppressed by the Council's authority. They saw a civilization that had been underestimated not for lack of skill or intelligence, but because of its moral restraint and patience. The story of humanity's preparation spread quietly at first, then loudly, inspiring hope and admiration. Many began to question the Council's methods, wondering if the time had come for accountability on a much larger scale. The tension reached its peak as the first Council patrols entered the sector, where the human fleet had positioned itself. Sensors picked up signatures far beyond what anyone had expected. The humans were not attacking, not yet, but their presence alone challenged the Council's authority. Communications were open, carefully monitored, and intended to demonstrate both power and restraint. Messages were sent to the Council, offering evidence of the attacks on the colonies and requesting acknowledgement of the truth. These messages were deliberate, broadcast to ensure that the Council's own citizens could see the evidence. Within the Council, the reaction was mixed. Some called for immediate retaliation, others for diplomacy, but no consensus emerged. Humanity had achieved something remarkable. By acting with clarity, precision, and moral purpose, it had created doubt, fear, and uncertainty in the minds of its opponents without firing a single shot. Meanwhile, civilians on Earth and allied worlds watched developments unfold in real time. News broadcasts explained the situation carefully, emphasizing that humanity's goal was justice, not revenge. Stories of the colonies, their bravery, and their tragic fate were shared, connecting audiences emotionally to the unfolding events. This was more than strategy or military preparation. It was a demonstration of human integrity, showing that even in the face of betrayal, humanity could act with honor. The first direct communication from the Council came in the form of a warning. Their message was stern, laced with threats, and assumed that humans would retreat if confronted with superior numbers. But Earth's response was measured, calm, and clear. The truth will be revealed. Innocent lives have been lost, and accountability will follow. We do not seek war. We seek justice. The words were simple, but their impact resonated far beyond the immediate audience. This moment marked a turning point. Humanity had demonstrated that it could operate strategically, morally, and effectively under pressure. The Council's reaction revealed weakness, hesitation, and fear, while humans had shown preparation, courage, and resolve. Allies who had been uncertain now moved closer, offering resources, intelligence, and support. Humanity was no longer just a planet preparing to act. It had become a symbol, a beacon of accountability and hope across the galaxy. Even as tensions rose, the Dawnlight team and fleet commanders knew the path ahead was still uncertain. The Council could respond with force, try to discredit evidence, or attempt to divide humanity from its allies. But by combining careful planning, precise action, and the moral weight of truth, humanity had created a situation where confrontation, if it came, would not be a battle of firepower alone. It would be a battle for credibility, for justice, and for the very principles that had been violated by the Council's betrayal. As Part 3 drew to a close, humanity's position in the galaxy had fundamentally changed. It was no longer seen as a recovering or passive civilization. It was a force capable of standing against deception and betrayal, of uniting people across systems, and of demanding accountability with unwavering resolve. The first real steps toward action had been taken, not through violence but through strategy, preparation, and moral clarity. The galaxy had begun to notice, and the Council, once confident and unchallenged, was forced to reckon with a truth it had long ignored. The humans it underestimated were ready, and they would not stop until justice was served. The galaxy had grown quiet in the sectors near Earth, but it was not a calm silence. Beneath that stillness, a storm was forming, one born not from anger but from purpose. Humanity had prepared for months, gathering evidence, refining strategy, and waiting for the right moment. Now that moment had arrived. The first public act of truth and accountability would soon be broadcast across countless star systems. The lead human fleet, composed of advanced warships and support vessels, moved through the outer edges of the galaxy with a precision that was almost invisible to sensors. Cloaked in advanced stealth technology, the ships navigated past Council patrols, avoiding detection while positioning themselves to deliver their message. Every vessel, every crew member understood the stakes. This was not about war. It was about revealing the truth, exposing betrayal, and ensuring that no other colonies would fall without witnesses. On board the flagship, the commander studied the projected paths of the Council fleets. Intercepted communications suggested that the Council was still unaware of the full extent of Earth's preparations. Their arrogance had blinded them to the growing capabilities of a civilization they had underestimated. The commander's mind weighed every option carefully, balancing the need for visibility with the risk of confrontation. The goal was clear: ensure the evidence reached every corner of the galaxy without causing unnecessary harm. The first transmissions began quietly. Earth's fleet broadcasted data packets to nearby systems, encrypted but accessible to Council and allied civilizations alike. These transmissions contained undeniable proof: the recorded last moments of the colonies, the intercepted orders from Council commanders, and clear evidence that the destruction had been deliberate. Images, videos, and data streams painted a vivid, unaltered picture of the atrocities. For the first time, the galaxy had direct access to the truth. The effect was immediate. Ships in neutral sectors paused to intercept the messages. Civilian systems, previously hesitant to challenge the Council, began to watch, read, and analyze. Across countless planets, the populations reacted with shock, disbelief, and growing outrage. The story of the destroyed colonies was no longer a secret whispered in corners. It was a broadcast for all to see, and it was undeniable. Council leaders were blindsided. They had anticipated indirect exposure, minor leaks, and slow dissemination of information. They had not expected a coordinated, transparent, and public display of truth. Panic rippled through the halls of command. Orders were sent hastily, fleets scrambled, and communication officers attempted to trace the origin of the transmissions. But Earth had planned for this. Every move had contingencies. Every broadcast had multiple relay points. The Council could not silence the evidence. Amid the chaos, the humans continued their operation with calm precision. Specialized ships acted as mobile data hubs, amplifying transmissions to reach distant systems. They ensured that neutral planets, those who had yet to choose sides, received the evidence first. The goal was not to intimidate but to inform, to awaken the galaxy to the reality of what had been done and what humanity now demanded: accountability. In one distant system, a neutral world intercepted the transmission and relayed it immediately to its population. Leaders there were shocked to see the evidence, but they were equally inspired by humanity's restraint and strategy. Humans had demonstrated that strength and morality could coexist, that it was possible to act decisively without resorting to needless destruction. The reaction was electric. Citizens and smaller military forces began sending supportive messages and pledges of assistance. Slowly, alliances began to form. Back in the Council's headquarters, arguments erupted. Some members wanted immediate retaliation, claiming humanity's actions were a threat to order. Others urged caution, realizing that retaliating would only expose more of the Council's misdeeds. For the first time in decades, the Council was divided. Their long-standing image of unshakable authority was crumbling, not because of superior firepower, but because the truth was unstoppable. Human commanders watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. They had not fired a single shot, yet they had shifted the balance of power. The act of broadcasting evidence had transformed the galaxy's perception of humanity. Humans were no longer seen as a recovering or isolated civilization. They were now recognized as a force capable of standing for justice, capable of challenging corruption and exposing truth. and capable of uniting systems that had long been neglected or oppressed. At the same time, Earth was careful to avoid escalation. While the fleet remained in strategic positions, it did not engage the Council directly. The transmissions continued, providing more context and personal stories from the lost colonies. Families who had survived, scientists who had escaped, and witnesses who had recorded the events were included. Their voices were raw, emotional, and compelling, reminding the galaxy that these were real beings, not abstract statistics or numbers on a screen. The human broadcasts also emphasized a critical point. The goal was not revenge. Humanity sought justice, transparency, and accountability. This distinction mattered deeply. By framing the operation as moral and measured, humans gained legitimacy in the eyes of other civilizations. It became clear that Earth's actions were motivated by a sense of responsibility, not anger. The contrast with the Council's reckless and violent betrayal was stark, and it only strengthened humanity's credibility. As the transmissions reached more systems, small-scale reactions began to take shape. Some planets sent observers to the outskirts of the human fleet, curious to witness the operation firsthand. Others began sending resources, offering intelligence, or making tentative agreements to support Earth's goals. The ripple effect of the broadcast was extraordinary. Humanity had created momentum without firing a weapon, using strategy, morality, and truth as their most powerful tools. In the Council's command centers, fear and confusion escalated. Leaders realized that they could no longer control the narrative. Evidence of their actions was now public, and every attempt to dismiss or discredit it failed. Even loyal factions within the Council began questioning orders and motives. The unity that had once been the Council's greatest strength was breaking apart, undermined by human strategy and unyielding moral clarity. For the crew of the human fleet, the stakes were clear. Every broadcast, every maneuver, and every relay of evidence was a step toward justice for the fallen colonies. They understood that history would judge their actions not by the strength of their ships, but by the courage, discipline, and ethical clarity they demonstrated. In quiet moments, many reflected on the families who had been lost, the colonies destroyed, and the lives forever changed. Each broadcast was a tribute, a way to ensure that those memories were honored and never forgotten. Even ordinary citizens on Earth felt connected to the operation. Families watched the unfolding story with pride and solemnity. Schools incorporated discussions about the importance of accountability and the courage it takes to stand for truth. Public broadcasts highlighted the heroism of individuals from the colonies and the resilience of humanity in the face of betrayal. Across the planet, people understood that this was not just a military operation, it was a moral mission, one that required the participation and support of everyone. The first major test came when a Council fleet attempted to intercept a transmission in a nearby sector. The humans had anticipated this move. Specialized electronic countermeasures rerouted the data, amplified the broadcast, and even created decoy signals to mislead the approaching fleet. The Council ships, now confused and overextended, failed to stop the transmission. Evidence reached more planets than ever, and the Council's inability to prevent it further undermined their credibility. By the end of this phase, the galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. Humanity had achieved what few civilizations could, a large-scale operation that shifted perceptions, united allies, and exposed betrayal, all without resorting to violence. The act of revealing the truth had become a weapon more powerful than any fleet, demonstrating that courage and strategy, guided by morality, could reshape the balance of power. For the humans on the fleet and on Earth, this was just the beginning. They knew that the Council would attempt to respond, that challenges lay ahead, and that the path to justice would be long and complex. But they also knew something essential. By standing for truth, by acting with restraint and clarity, they had fundamentally changed the narrative. They had proven that humanity could face betrayal, expose wrongdoing, and inspire hope, all at the same time. In quiet moments aboard the ships, crew members reflected on the significance of what had been accomplished. They were no longer simply participants in a military campaign. They were witnesses and guardians of justice. The colonies that had been lost were now remembered and honored in every decision, every broadcast, and every strategic maneuver. Humanity's story was becoming one of integrity, courage, and moral strength, a story that would resonate across the stars for generations to come. As Part 4 came to a close, the galaxy had begun to change. The Council, once confident and unchallenged, was forced to confront the consequences of its betrayal. Allies were moving closer, inspired by human restraint and clarity. The evidence of the atrocities had been made public, and the galaxy had begun to take notice. Humanity's broadcasts had reached countless systems, revealing the Council's betrayal and the destruction of the colonies. Neutral worlds were talking openly, questioning the authority of a body that had allowed such devastation to occur. Some had even begun quietly supporting Earth, sending supplies, intelligence, and small fleets in readiness. But for the humans, there was still one crucial step remaining. The evidence had been broadcast, allies had been quietly secured, and now it was time for action, the first direct confrontation that would show the Council that humanity was no longer a force to be underestimated. The human fleet had moved silently through the unmonitored sectors, positioning itself strategically near the Council's main observation outposts. The ships glided through the darkness, vast in size yet careful not to provoke unnecessary conflict. Each vessel carried personnel who understood the importance of restraint. Every decision, every maneuver, was calculated to demonstrate strength while avoiding indiscriminate destruction. Humanity's message had always been clear: justice, not revenge. Inside the command center of the flagship, the fleet commander observed the approaching Council forces. Their numbers were greater, their ships more numerous and heavily armed, but the humans were not intimidated. For months, Earth's military and intelligence teams had prepared for this moment, simulating countless scenarios and contingencies. They had accounted for every move, every possible reaction. Humanity was ready not just to fight, but to show the galaxy that courage, precision, and moral clarity could stand against sheer power. The first signs of contact came in the form of a Council patrol ship detecting the fleet's movements. Unlike previous encounters, this one could not be avoided. Communication channels opened, and the Council demanded explanations, their tone aggressive, their words filled with assumed authority. Yet humanity responded with calm, carefully chosen words. The commander addressed the Council directly, presenting evidence of the attacks on the colonies, detailing the intercepted messages, the destroyed settlements, and the lives lost due to deliberate Council decisions. For the first time, the Council could not ignore the truth. Their reaction was a mix of disbelief, anger, and panic. Some leaders wanted immediate retaliation, while others hesitated, realizing that any aggressive move would only further expose their crimes. The humans had anticipated this division. By presenting evidence with clarity, humanity had forced the Council into a situation where hesitation was inevitable and division was visible. The first engagement was not a battle of destruction, but a demonstration of capability. Human ships executed precise maneuvers, positioning themselves to block key Council routes without firing a shot. Defensive shields were raised, engines were silent, and decoys were deployed to confuse sensors. The Council fleet realized that humanity could strike if necessary, but the humans had shown restraint. It was a calculated display of power designed to prove that Earth could defend itself and its allies, while still maintaining ethical conduct. Across the galaxy, the broadcasts continued. Allied and neutral worlds observed the confrontation, seeing firsthand that humanity acted with purpose and control. Families who had lost loved ones in the destroyed colonies watched the transmissions with a mixture of hope and awe. They saw ships maneuver with precision, communications presenting undeniable evidence, and humans standing unwavering in the face of intimidation. It was a demonstration of courage that transcended weaponry. It was a demonstration of the values that guided every decision. The Council, realizing that conventional intimidation would not work, attempted a different strategy. They deployed larger fleets, sending heavily armed warships to surround Earth's position. But humanity had anticipated this. Using advanced stealth technology and strategic planning, human ships created multiple points of observation, allowing them to monitor Council movements without being directly engaged. Decoy transmissions and simulated fleet patterns misled the Council into underestimating the fleet's true positioning. Despite the tension, humanity's goal remained clear: accountability. The first direct engagement was meant to showcase strength, not to destroy. Council ships, while massive and powerful, were carefully observed and, where necessary, disabled with precision targeting to avoid loss of life. Weapon systems were neutralized, engines were temporarily jammed, and command centers were disrupted without causing fatalities. Every action was measured to prove a point. Earth would act decisively, but it would do so with restraint and purpose. The psychological impact on the Council was profound. For decades, they had ruled with an unquestioned sense of authority, believing that no civilization could challenge them effectively. Humanity had changed that perception entirely. By demonstrating precision, intelligence, and moral clarity, Earth had shown that strength was not measured solely by firepower, but by the ability to act with strategy, ethics, and courage. Doubt began to spread among Council leaders. Who had underestimated whom? As the confrontation continued, the humans took the opportunity to present further evidence directly to Council fleets. Communications channels were opened, showing the detailed records of destroyed colonies, including testimonies from survivors and images of the devastation. This transparency was deliberate. It forced even the Council soldiers, the officers following orders, to confront the reality of what their leaders had done. It was a moment of reckoning, where humanity did not just defend itself but shone a light on crimes long hidden behind bureaucracy and arrogance. In neutral systems, observers were increasingly vocal. Many planets that had remained silent, uncertain about whether to challenge the Council, began openly supporting Earth. Messages of solidarity, supplies, and intelligence were sent through secure channels. What had started as a quiet demonstration of capability had now become a rallying point for justice across multiple sectors. Humanity's actions had created a wave of moral and strategic influence that the Council could not contain. Within the human fleet, crew members understood the significance of what they were witnessing. This was not just a military operation, it was a historic moment. Each maneuver, each carefully executed action, represented not just defense but the affirmation of values that had guided Earth for decades. Engineers, pilots, communication officers, and strategists worked seamlessly together, ensuring that every broadcast, every tactical move, and every observation supported the overarching goal: justice for the fallen colonies. The Council's attempts at counteraction became increasingly desperate. Fleets moved hastily, communications were scrambled, and some leaders sought to bypass evidence entirely, but the humans had prepared for this as well. Redundant systems, encrypted channels, and multiple relay points ensured that the truth could not be silenced. Even when confronted with aggressive maneuvers, humanity responded with calm, adjusting positions and demonstrating capability without engaging in reckless violence. This first confrontation became a turning point. Humanity had proven it could act decisively, protect its interests, and challenge the most powerful alliance in the galaxy, all while adhering to ethical principles. Allies gained confidence, neutral worlds were inspired, and the Council's authority began to crumble. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary, a civilization standing for justice, not through fear or intimidation, but through precision, strategy, and unwavering moral clarity. The final moments of the first engagement were as calculated as the beginning. Council ships, recognizing the futility of further immediate aggression, retreated to regroup, leaving behind critical observation points that humanity had now secured. The human fleet maintained vigilance but did not pursue aggressively. The goal had been achieved: a direct confrontation, decisive yet restrained, had established humanity's presence, credibility, and moral authority. On Earth, civilians watched broadcasts of the operation with pride and awe. Schools used the event as a teaching moment, emphasizing courage, preparation, and ethics. Families discussed the importance of standing up for justice, and communities celebrated the successful demonstration that morality and strategy could coexist. Across countless worlds, the story of the human fleet's precision and restraint spread, inspiring admiration and hope. Even in the aftermath, humanity's leadership remained focused on accountability. Plans were immediately made to continue monitoring Council movements, secure evidence, and engage with allies to strengthen the coalition of truth and justice. The first confrontation had not only demonstrated capability, but it had also set the stage for continued strategic action. Humanity understood that this was only the beginning of a broader effort to ensure that no betrayal would go unanswered. In the quiet moments aboard the flagship, the commander reflected on the magnitude of what had been accomplished. This was more than a tactical victory. It was a proof that patience, preparation, and moral integrity could achieve results that raw power alone could not. Every maneuver, every broadcast, every act of precision had sent a clear message. Humanity would protect the innocent, expose wrongdoing, and act decisively when required, but always with a conscience. The galaxy, now aware of the confrontation, began to change in subtle but meaningful ways. Previously passive systems started questioning author. The aftermath of the first confrontation left the galaxy in a state of uneasy reflection. The Council, once confident and seemingly untouchable, had been exposed. Their betrayal of the colonies was no longer a secret, and the ripple effects of humanity's decisive yet restrained action continued to spread across countless systems. Earth's fleet returned to monitored positions near key sectors, but the mission had already achieved something far greater than tactical success. It had reshaped the moral and political landscape of the galaxy. Across Earth and allied worlds, people were no longer waiting passively for events to unfold. They had witnessed a civilization rise to a challenge not with anger, but with precision, planning, and ethics. Schools, media outlets, and public forums all focused on what had been accomplished. Families shared stories of courage from the fleet crews, engineers, and analysts who had worked tirelessly to prepare for this moment. Ordinary citizens, many of whom had contributed in small ways, now understood that their support and vigilance were part of a larger movement toward justice. The Dawnlight team, the brains behind the entire operation, convened for the first time since the confrontation. The mood was sober but resolute. They had proven that humanity could challenge a powerful alliance and expose wrongdoing. But the work was far from over. The Council, humiliated and wary, was already attempting to regroup, and humanity needed to ensure that their actions resulted in lasting change. The team reviewed the collected evidence, the broadcasts that had reached neutral worlds, and the statements made by allies. They realized that Earth now held both moral and strategic leverage, the kind that could permanently alter galactic power dynamics. Meanwhile, the Council attempted to maintain a facade of authority. Fleet commanders issued orders, Council officials held closed meetings, and propaganda aimed to discredit humanity began to circulate. But it was ineffective. The broadcasts from Earth had already reached neutral and allied worlds. The testimony of survivors, the records of destroyed colonies, and the strategic restraint demonstrated by the human fleet made any attempt at denial impossible. Humanity had not only won the first confrontation, it had won credibility. As the weeks passed, Earth shifted from confrontation to consolidation. The fleet maintained presence near critical sectors, ensuring the Council could not attempt any covert operations without being observed. Advanced sensors monitored the movements of Council warships, while communication relays connected allied worlds in real-time coordination. These actions were preventive, not aggressive, demonstrating that Earth's priority remained protection and accountability, not conquest. The colonies that had been lost were honored in multiple ways. Memorials were broadcast across the galaxy, showing images of the settlements, the brave individuals who had lived there, and the sacrifices made by those who tried to protect others. Schools and civilian centers included these stories in educational materials, teaching future generations about courage, justice, and the importance of standing against betrayal. Humanity was turning tragedy into a lesson for the entire galaxy, ensuring that the memories of the fallen would inspire action and vigilance for decades to come. Allies, previously hesitant, became more openly supportive. Small fleets and supply convoys arrived to assist Earth's strategic efforts. Civilian worlds shared intelligence, offered safe harbors for observation posts, and even began discussions about forming a coalition to prevent similar atrocities in the future. Humanity had become a symbol not only of strength but of moral clarity. The idea that a single civilization could stand for truth and justice inspired hope and courage throughout the galaxy. Human leadership remained focused on restraint. The Dawnlight team, fleet commanders, and Earth's political leaders emphasized that accountability did not require unnecessary violence. Plans were developed for conflict only if provoked or if the Council attempted to flee responsibility. The humans understood that their credibility depended not just on exposing wrongdoing, but on acting ethically in every step that followed. Every broadcast maneuver and engagement was a demonstration of moral discipline, combined with strategic effectiveness. One significant step was the establishment of a Galactic Oversight Council. convened with representatives from neutral, allied, and liberated worlds. Humanity played a leading role in this new assembly, using evidence gathered from the colonies and their own operations to guide discussions on accountability, oversight, and prevention. The Council, weakened and under scrutiny, was forced to participate or face continued isolation and loss of legitimacy. For the first time in decades, power was being balanced not through intimidation but through transparency, ethics, and collective responsibility. Civilian involvement remained vital. Volunteers on Earth and allied worlds continued to process data, monitor transmissions, and maintain communications networks. Engineers and scientists worked to upgrade defense and observation systems, not to prepare for war, but to ensure that humanity and its allies could respond to future threats. Schools continued to emphasize the principles of courage, morality, and accountability, ensuring that future generations would not repeat past mistakes. Across the galaxy, ordinary beings began to understand that standing for justice was not just the responsibility of leaders or fleets, but of every individual willing to act with integrity. The Council, meanwhile, faced internal challenges. Some leaders advocated for reform, others attempted to consolidate remaining power, and still others plotted to reclaim their lost authority. Humanity watched closely, continuing to maintain pressure through intelligence networks and public broadcasts. But unlike previous confrontations, these actions were calculated to encourage accountability rather than provoke escalation. The message was clear: honesty, justice, and restraint were not weaknesses, they were humanity's strength. Over time, the combined efforts of Earth, allied worlds, and supportive neutral systems began to stabilize the galaxy. Planets that had been fearful of the Council felt safer. Systems previously exploited or neglected were now included in oversight discussions. The story of the colonies, their loss, and humanity's response became a foundational narrative for the new era. A story of courage, strategy, and moral clarity that would guide decisions for generations. In the final months following the confrontation, humanity reflected on what had been achieved. Fleet crews and civilian teams received recognition for their contributions, but the emphasis was always on collective action, not individual glory. Memorials, broadcasts, and public forums reinforced the idea that courage was measured by service, integrity, and the willingness to act in defense of truth. Humanity had proven that moral clarity and strategic planning could overcome betrayal, challenge authority, and inspire hope. The long-term effects of the operation were profound. The Council, permanently weakened and closely monitored, could no longer act with impunity. Neutral and allied worlds continued to participate in oversight and intelligence sharing. Systems that had once felt powerless now had a voice. Humanity had demonstrated that courage, preparation, and ethical action could reshape political and moral structures on a galactic scale. In the quiet moments aboard the human flagship, commanders reflected on the journey. From the first intercepted messages revealing the destruction of the colonies to the public broadcasts and the first confrontation, every decision had been guided by patience, strategy, and moral clarity. The galaxy had been forced to reckon with truth, and humanity had set a precedent for how power could be exercised responsibly. Even as life returned to a sense of normalcy on Earth, the fleet remained vigilant. The lesson was clear: betrayal could strike again, but humanity had demonstrated its ability to respond decisively and ethically. Observers from allied systems continued to monitor Council movements, ensuring that no action went unchecked. Humanity's message was now permanent. Justice was not negotiable, and truth would always be defended. Across the galaxy, the story of Earth and the colonies became legend, not as a tale of conquest or vengeance, but as a testament to courage, ethical strength, and the power of strategy guided by morality. The memory of the fallen colonies was preserved, their stories told alongside the achievements of those who ensured their suffering would not be in vain. Humanity had turned grief into action, betrayal into accountability, and tragedy into a guiding force for a brighter future. As Part 6 drew to a close, the galaxy had entered a new era. The Council's authority was checked, alliances were strengthened, and the memory of the colonies was honored in every system. Humanity had proven that power could be exercised with ethics, courage, and foresight. The fleet held its positions. The Dawnlight team continued their work. and Earth's people remained committed to the principles that had guided every action. The legacy of the operation was clear. Standing for truth and justice was not just a responsibility. It was a defining characteristic of a civilization capable of shaping the galaxy. Humanity had acted decisively, strategically, and morally. The fallen colonies had been avenged not through violence alone, but through unwavering courage and clarity of purpose. In the quiet expanse of space, as stars shimmered across the darkness, Earth's fleet remained a beacon of hope and justice. The story of betrayal, resilience, and moral victory would echo across an